My name is Lena Hart. I'm 22 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the good kid in our small, suffocating house in suburban Illinois. If you'd asked my parents who I was last year, they'd tell you I was quiet but obedient, hardworking, and a good daughter who doesn't cause trouble. That was the version they liked to parade around at family dinners, so they could brag about how they raised the perfect child on a tight budget. But they never really knew me, not the real me. They only saw what they wanted, someone they could shape, control, and use whenever they needed to feel better about their own failures. They never expected me to fight back, and they sure as hell never thought I'd ever tell this story. So here I am telling it all. Growing up in the Hart house was like living under permanent surveillance. My dad, Carl Hart, worked a dead-end factory job, but acted like he owned a Fortune 500 company. My mom, Diane, was a part-time librarian who used her job as an excuse to dig into everyone's business, the nosy neighbor type who always peeked through the curtains when someone new moved in. I was the only child, which meant all their hopes, disappointments, and insecurities landed directly on my shoulders. I didn't get to be a normal teenager, no sleepovers, no parties, no spontaneous road trips with friends. If I wanted to breathe fresh air, I had to earn it by bringing home perfect grades. If I slipped up even once, my dad's lectures could last for hours, each word a reminder that I owed them everything. So when college came around, I did what I was told, enrolled at a local community college to save money, stayed home to avoid dorm fees, and took a part-time job at a cheap diner just to cover my books and snacks. I didn't complain, at least not out loud. Inside, I hated it. I watched my classmates move into dorms, decorate tiny rooms with fairy lights, laugh with roommates, date freely. Meanwhile, I was driving my mom's battered Ford Focus to campus and back every day, pretending this was normal. Then came the loan. It wasn't even a real loan at first. When I turned 19, my dad pulled me aside and said he'd help with my tuition if I promised to pay him back. I remember standing in our cramped kitchen as he scribbled an amount $10,000 on a piece of yellow-lined paper like it was a legal contract. My mom stood behind him, arms crossed, nodding so hard I thought her neck would snap. "Don't think this is free," Dad said. "You're an adult now. Adults pay their debts." I nodded because what else could I do? Back then, $10,000 felt like a fortune. I was grateful, stupidly so. I signed the paper like an obedient little doll, thinking this was just another hoop to jump through to keep the peace. But life has a cruel sense of humor. Halfway through my second year, my manager at the diner cut my hours. I went from scraping by to sinking fast. I applied for other part-time jobs, retail, babysitting, tutoring, but no one was hiring. Bills piled up, gas money ran low, and all the while, my dad's voice echoed in my head, "Adults pay their debts." One night, I came home exhausted after a 12-hour shift where I'd made more tips than usual, $35 and some change. Dad was waiting in the living room like a stone gargoyle. He didn't say hi. He didn't ask how work was. Instead, he asked, "Where's my money?" I told him I was trying. I asked for more time. I said the semester was almost over, and I'd pick up extra shifts when classes ended. I thought he'd understand. I thought he'd see how hard I was working to keep my head above water. I thought wrong. The next morning, my mom woke me up by pounding on my door like I'd committed a crime. She didn't come in, she never did when Dad was angry, but her voice was sharp enough to slice through the door. "Your father says if you can't pay him back by next month, you can pack your things and leave. He won't be made a fool of." I lay there, staring at the cracks in my ceiling, feeling something inside me break. All these years of sacrifices, the missed parties, the skipped dates, the hours I'd spent making their lives easier, and none of it mattered because I couldn't cough up $10,000 on demand. That night, I sat at the cheap desk in my childhood bedroom and stared at my bank balance, $247. 15. It might as well have been zero. I wish I could tell you I cried or called a friend or even prayed for a miracle. But I didn't do any of that. I just sat there in the dark and realized something important. I wasn't their daughter anymore. Not really. I was a debt, an expense they wanted paid off. So I made myself a promise, the first real promise I'd ever made to myself, not to them. If they were going to disown me over $10K, then I'd give them a reason to regret it. I'd pay them back in a way they'd never see coming, and when I stood on my own feet, they'd never be able to touch me again. I wish I could say I left on my own terms. I wish I could tell you I slammed the door behind me with my head held high, middle finger in the air, never looking back. But the truth is uglier than that. It happened 2 weeks after Dad gave his final ultimatum. I'd scraped together every tip, every last cent from my tiny paychecks, and even sold the cheap old laptop I used for my classes. Still, the total was laughable, not even $500. I kept telling myself they wouldn't actually do it. They were my parents. Parents fight, they yell. They threaten, but they don't really throw their only kid onto the street over a loan they forced her to sign, right. Wrong, it was a Friday afternoon when it happened. I came home from class to find a cardboard box on my bed, with the same faded floral comforter I'd had since I was 12. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms folded so tight her knuckles were white. She didn't even look at me. She stared past me, like I was a stranger. I asked her, "Where's Dad?" She just nodded toward the driveway. I looked outside and saw him leaning against my car well, his car technically, since he'd signed for it and reminded me every month. His arms were crossed, same as hers, a perfect mirror of cold resolve. When I stepped outside, the first thing he said wasn't "I'm sorry." It wasn't "let's talk." It was "keys." I stared at him. "What? Hand over the car keys, Lena. You don't own this. You're done here." I laughed a short, broken sound that didn't sound like me at all. "You're serious? You're taking the car too?" He didn't blink. He didn't budge. He just held out his hand, palm up, like I was supposed to thank him for this lesson in responsibility. Inside, Mom was already dragging my box to the door. Her lips pressed so tight I thought they'd split. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg. I wanted to throw the box through the window. But what was the point? I dropped the keys into Dad's hand. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even look at me. He just turned away and lit a cigarette, like I was no more important than the smoke drifting into the cold dusk. By sundown, I was standing on the curb with one overstuffed duffel bag, a cardboard box of textbooks and thrift, store clothes, and my phone with 12% battery, no car, no money, no friends nearby because who wants to hang out with the sad girl who never gets to go out? My phone buzzed with a text from my mom, the last words she'd send me for months. "We hope this teaches you something. When you're ready to pay back your father's money, call us." I didn't cry. I didn't break down on that street. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction if they peeked out through the blinds. Instead, I sat on the curb under the flickering streetlight, the box at my feet, hugging my knees against the spring chill. I watched cars pass families heading to dinner, couples arguing about takeout orders, kids laughing in the backseat, all of them oblivious to the girl who just got exiled by the two people who swore they'd love her no matter what. I stayed there for hours. I thought about calling someone an old classmate, a coworker from the diner, but every name felt like an echo of pity. I couldn't do it, not yet, not when the humiliation was still fresh, still burning down my throat like bile. At midnight, I dragged myself to the bus stop with my duffel bag slung over my shoulder. The last bus into the city was late, so late I thought I'd missed it until the headlights cut through the dark. I climbed aboard with a crumpled $5 bill I'd found in my coat pocket. The bus driver didn't look at me twice. No one did. I sat in the back, pressed my forehead to the window, and watched the streetlights smear into gold streaks as the suburbs gave way to the city skyline. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a hero moment waiting for me on the other side of the bridge. I had $200 in my bank account and a bag of clothes that smelled like my childhood bedroom. But I had one thing my parents didn't expect: anger, not the petty kind, not the teenage tantrum that blows over in an hour. This was the kind of anger that buries itself in your bones, that replays every insult, every slammed door, every smug look on my father's face while he pocketed my car keys like a trophy. Sitting there on that freezing bus seat, I made myself a vow. They wanted me gone, fine. They wanted me to feel worthless, good. Because the next time they saw my name, it wouldn't be in a pathetic text begging to come home. It would be on something so big, they'd choke on every cruel word they ever threw at me. They thought $10K would break me. It was about to make me. I wish I could say I found a warm bed that night, some safe couch, a friend's spare blanket, anything. But the truth is, the bus dropped me off downtown at 1:13 a.m., and I stepped out into air so cold my teeth hurt when I breathed. My duffel bag weighed 100 pounds on my shoulder. I tried to keep my chin up, tried to walk like I belonged there. The city at night is a different beast. Neon lights humming over shuttered shops, steam rising from the sewer grates, people drifting in and out of shadows. At first, I told myself I'd find a cheap motel one night just to figure it out, but I had $200 to my name. $200 wouldn't last a week, let alone a month. So instead, I found a 24-hour diner, ordered the cheapest coffee they had, and claimed a cracked vinyl booth in the corner. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with half-tired eyes, sized me up quick, but didn't say anything. She just kept topping up my mug with watery brew as the night dragged on. I watched the door every time it jingled open. I counted the crumpled dollars in my pocket. I stared at the phone on the table, a single name glowing under Mom. One new message, but I didn't open it. I dozed off around 4 a.m., head on my arms, the smell of burnt coffee and stale pie filling my dreams. A tap on my shoulder jolted me awake. "Hey, kid, you gotta order something else or move along." The waitress's voice was soft but final. I glanced around. The dawn light was leaking through the blinds, and I realized I'd been there for hours, a ghost among the early risers and night stragglers. I scraped together enough for a stale kvass, dropped $1 in the tip jar stupid, but I didn't want her to think I was just another stray. Then I hoisted my bag and stepped back into the freezing dawn. The next few days were a blur. Cheap coffee, library lobbies, a few hours sleep on benches under buzzing streetlights. I showered once at a rec center, changed in gas station bathrooms, ate whatever I could afford half-price sandwiches, vending machine crackers. Each dollar burned in my pocket like a countdown. One night, huddled in the back corner of the library just before closing, I found myself staring at the public computer screensaver. Free Wi-Fi, start your next chapter. It made me laugh sharp, humorless. Next chapter, cute. That same night, I overheard 2 students talking near the printer about freelance gigs. One said something about copywriting, writing ads, blogs, product descriptions just enough to make rent. They rattled off some website names. I typed every one into my notes app, fingers trembling with cold. I didn't sleep that night. I sat cross-legged on the library floor, using my last bit of battery and free Wi-Fi to sign up for every cheap gig site I could find. I used an old half-finished essay as my writing sample. I promised to deliver fast, cheap, and perfect. I was desperate, which meant I was dangerous. The first job paid $10. Some guy in another country wanted 500 words about a travel backpack he was selling on Amazon. I wrote it hunched over my duffel bag at 3 a.m. in the bus station lobby. When the $10 hit my PayPal, I stared at it like it was a winning lottery ticket. That's when it hit me. If nobody would give me a break, I'd make my own. Word by word, dollar by dollar, 1 gig, then 5, 10, 100, I'd turn this nowhere money into something. I wasn't special. I wasn't smarter than the next broke girl, but I was angry. I was hungry. And that made me willing to work harder than anyone my parents had ever called family. They threw me out to teach me a lesson. They were about to learn mine. For the first time since they threw me out, I didn't wake up feeling like a ghost. It wasn't much a $10 gig, then 20, then 50, but it was mine. Nobody could take it back, repossess it, or threaten to pull the keys on it. In those first weeks, I learned more in library corners and late night bus stops than I ever did in those stale college classrooms my dad bragged about paying for. I learned how to write ad copy for strangers in London, descriptions for Etsy stores in Berlin, social posts for bored realtors in Florida. My words, not my father's money, were paying for my next meal. And every cent felt like fuel. I'd found a 24-hour co-working space downtown with ancient computers and burnt coffee that somehow tasted better than pity. I'd buy a cup just to sit in a warm corner for hours, hammering away at every gig I could grab. I lived off day, old muffins and discount ramen. I napped on my bag. I didn't care. I was free broke, cold, exhausted but free in a way I'd never felt under my parents' roof. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I saw the post that flipped the switch in my brain for good. Some guy on a freelancer forum was bragging about making $500 writing LinkedIn bios for tech execs, $500 for words that convinced strangers they were more interesting than they really were. I read that post twice, then 3 times. That's when the spark hit me. If people would pay that much to sound impressive, what else would they pay for? I didn't sleep. I stayed in that squeaky plastic chair and scribbled ideas in my notebook until the sun rose over the city skyline. My parents thought I was some helpless kid who'd crawl back begging for forgiveness, a stupid girl who'd never survive a week without their money. But I realized something. All that time, they thought they were teaching me responsibility. I'd actually learned how to play pretend to smile, to pitch, to talk big numbers. All those dinner parties I sat through, watching my dad brag to clients about deals he never closed, that was training. My training, by the end of that week, I'd crafted my first real offer, premium pitch decks for small businesses. I'd ghostwrite them, polish their big ideas, make them sound 10 times smarter than they were. I posted my new gig with a fake business name, Heart and Bold Consulting. It sounded real enough, clean enough. Nobody needed to know I was just a girl with a cracked phone, living off diner Wi-Fi and day, old Quases. 2 days later, someone bit, a local realtor. He needed a pitch to win a $2 million property deal. He was desperate, clueless, and more than willing to wire me $200 up front just to make him look like a star. When that money hit my account, I swear I felt a piece of my old self click back into place, the piece my parents tried to bury under shame and threats. I stayed up 2 nights straight writing that pitch. Slides, taglines, market analysis, all stolen from late night Google searches and repackaged in my own words. When he won the deal, he sent me a bonus, $100, more than my mom ever left in my birthday cards. And that's when I knew, if I could sell him a dream, I could sell anyone a dream. It wouldn't happen overnight. It wouldn't fix everything in a week. But it was a spark, the first flicker of the fire, that would burn every lie my parents ever told me about who I could or couldn't be. They left me with nothing. I was about to turn that nothing into everything, and they'd watch every second of it. After that first bonus, something snapped awake inside me, a part of me my parents thought they'd smothered under their rules and threats. I realized the whole time they'd been lecturing me about earning my keep. They'd never actually done it themselves. Dad was all talk at country club lunches. Mom posed for social media likes. They threw around my future like a football at Thanksgiving. Our daughter will do this. Our daughter won't do that. Now their daughter was doing something none of them saw coming. Word spread fast. Realtors talk. Small business owners talk. I barely slept for weeks, hunched over library desks and diner counters, rewriting the same pitch slides, cold demailing strangers, promising them words that would win them money they'd never have made alone. I built fake websites with free trials, stole templates from bigger agencies, and rewrote them in my voice. Heart and Bold Consulting started to look real enough that people stopped asking questions. My phone pinged nonstop. Venmo, PayPal, random wires from people with names I couldn't pronounce. Some days it was $50, some days it was $500. I ate better gas station sushi instead of stale muffins. I paid for a week at a cheap motel so I could shower without hiding my bag under my coat. I didn't buy new clothes, didn't blow it on new shoes or a fancy phone. Every dollar I didn't spend went into a secret account with a brand new password my parents could never guess. By month 3, I had over $700 in that account. $7,000 more than my parents ever trusted me with in my entire life. Every time I checked that balance, I felt my spine straighten. They thought they'd cut me off good. They'd handed me the knife I'd used to slice every chain they'd wrapped around my throat. But here's the thing about revenge, it can't just be petty. Petty stings for a second. Real revenge echoes forever. So I started thinking bigger. One night, after sending off a deck for a startup pitch worth millions money, I'd never see a cut if I sat in that grimy motel room and stared at the ceiling. I asked myself, why stop at decks? Why not write the whole plan? See, my father's business was built on reputation. He'd never admit it, but his big deals were paper tigers' inflated promises, numbers massaged just enough to impress clueless investors. He never bothered to protect anything because he assumed no one outside the family would know where to look. But I was family. I'd seen the books, the pitches, the secret handshake deals. All those nights I sat at the dinner table while he ranted about which idiot clients he'd squeeze next. I remembered everything, so I did the thing that would keep me up at night for months. I started drafting my own pitch, but this time the product wasn't real estate or software or stocks. It was him. His secrets, his cooked books, his handshake deals with tax loopholes big enough to drive a truck through, all tied up in a neat, anonymous dossier I'd deliver when the time was right. I'd make enough noise to tank his next deal. Maybe two, maybe all of them. I'd use the same words he taught me to twist the same words he thought made him untouchable, and I'd cut him off at the knees while standing on my own 2 feet. I didn't know exactly when I'd pull the trigger. Not yet, I wasn't ready, but for the first time, I felt the power shift. I wasn't the kid begging to come home anymore. I was the storm knocking on the door I promised my mother I'd come home, and I did, just not the way they hoped. 6 months after my father first told me return the $50K or don't come back, I stood at their front door again, same cracked welcome mat, same brass handle that stuck when you turned it. But this time, I wasn't a girl begging for their love. I was the storm they'd been pretending couldn't reach them. I rang the bell once. Mom answered like she'd seen a ghost. Maybe she had. The Lena she'd banished wasn't the Lena who stood here now, hair pinned up, cheap blazer hiding contracts worth triple the hush money they thought they'd bought me with. Dad stepped in behind her. He looked older than I remembered, thinner hair, the same forced grin he'd used to charm every city deal he'd ever closed. I watched it crack when he saw the folder under my arm. "Lena," he started, reaching for a hug. Like we were family again. I didn't move. "I came to return what I owe," I said. My voice was too calm for him to read. I stepped inside, past Mom's weak protests, straight to the dining table. I dropped the folder in front of them. Dad flipped it open like a man who still thought he was in control. Inside wasn't a check. It was paperwork, notarized statements, email trails, tax records, evidence of the shell games he'd played for years. Fake invoices, hidden debts, double, booked contracts, and enough names to make sure the city board, the same one that once gave him sweetheart deals, couldn't look away this time. Mom gasped when she realized what she was seeing. Dad's face went red, then white. "You wouldn't," he hissed. "Oh, I already did," I said, sliding him my phone. A single screen lit up my anonymous leak posted on every local news outlet. The headlines were brutal. "Respected developer under investigation for fraud." His golf buddies, his partners, his last loyal clients, they were reading it now, all at once. He lunged at me. "Old habit, intimidate, corner, roar until you get your way." But this time I didn't flinch. I didn't move back. I just looked him in the eye and said, "You told me not to come home unless I returned the money, so I returned everything, every dirty deal, every lie, every secret you thought you buried under my silence." Mom started to cry, real tears this time. The house, the cars, the country club status, all of it about to crumble with the man who built it on my loyalty and my fear. "Why?" Dad gasped, like he didn't understand. I almost laughed. "Why?" As if he hadn't raised me on conditions, love with strings attached, family with fine print. He'd taught me to fight for scraps while Tara, the golden child, got handed second chances I paid for in apologies and obedience. So I paid him back, interest included. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I looked around the house one last time, the same walls that saw my tears, my failures, my quiet heartbreaks. I felt nothing for them anymore. "You taught me about debts, Dad," Consider it settled. I turned to Mom. She reached for me like she wanted to say something, sorry, maybe, or please. But I was done translating her silence into love. Outside, I didn't run. I didn't look back. My new team, the Misfits and Outcasts, who helped me build something real, were waiting. We had new clients, bigger dreams. No family strings to yank us back into the dirt. I didn't just get revenge, I got free, and for the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was. I was Lena, the daughter you underestimated, the storm you never saw coming, and this time, when I walked away, I didn't owe them a damn thing.